New information now on North Korea. The rogue nation may be preparing for, yes, another nuclear test. Satellite imagery showing signs of activity at the country's underground testing site. The latest round of saber rattling comes as we learn more details about President Trump's planned meeting with the president of China next week. Joining me now is Michael Auslin, Director of Japan Studies at the American Enterprise Institute and author of The End of the Asian Century. Let's talk first, sir, about what this means about the build-up to yet another possible nuclear test by North Korea, especially on the eve of these meetings that we expect from President Trump and President Xi at Mar-a-Lago next week.
Hey, Ed. Well, look, it's something we should expect. The North Koreans, first of all, have a cycle for doing tests because they're in the midst of trying to perfect their weapon. That's number one. Number two, they do try to time these either to American holidays or to important meetings, basically to let the world know and to let the counterparts of North Korea know that they're still there. So the reality is I don't think we should be surprised. The big question is, can President Trump put pressure on China to finally begin resolving this crisis?
And, you know, I've heard the same from covering the White House of President Bush, President Obama as well. Get the Chinese to put pressure, and it never seems to happen.
Well, I think because what we expect is that they can put political pressure on the North, and I think that's mistaken. This is a leader, Kim Jong-un, in North Korea, who is really uncontrollable in many ways. What we have to do is tell China that if they don't start putting economic pressure on North Korea, which is the type of leverage that they have, then we're going to take steps against the Chinese companies and the Chinese banks that are in essence abetting North Korea with billions of dollars in trade.
What about Senator John McCain? He's powerful chairman, obviously, of the Senate Armed Services Committee. And he basically said this week that Kim Jong-un is, quote, a crazy fat kid. And that led the dictator to shoot back, and maybe it's just rhetorical, but to shoot back that there's going to be dire consequences for statements like that. What are we really to make of this North Korean leader? Is he just simply a crazy fat kid?
Well, if he is, he's a crazy fat kid who controls an enormous military and nuclear weapons. So it's not really helpful to call him that. I don't think any of the North Korean leaders have been crazy. They have been ruthless, and he is maybe the most ruthless among them. But what really worries me is that when you talk to folks in the intel community and folks who have worked on North Korea for a long time, they think that this is a guy who really is uncontrollable in a lot of ways. He's not as strategic as his father and grandfather was. This is a guy who is much more violent, much more dangerous, willing to use VX nerve gas in an airport in another country. That's why you have to put the real pressure on him to make it clear that if he steps out of that box, you know, he may no longer exist as a leader of this country. So
I take your point, Michael, that, look, it might be somebody who's crazy and uncontrollable, but he has nukes, and we have to obviously take him seriously. But some of these recent tests have seemed to have been abject failures that, you know, blow up within seconds. What are we to make of that? Is it just a lot of bluster, or can he back up these tests? How nervous, how worried should the international community be?
We should be very worried. Look, they learn even from the failures, just as we did back in the early days of the space program when all of our rockets blew up on the pad. You know, they're going to get there. And in fact, if you look at the most recent set of missile launches, they launched 3 missiles towards Japan. They put 3 missiles into the same vicinity in Japanese waters at about the same time. That's some pretty good shooting. That means that they have capabilities and they're extending them. So it's not something to take lightly at all.
So it's serious business. Last question, 30 seconds. If you were advising President Trump, what would be the one takeaway you'd want him to get out of that little mini summit at Mar-a-Lago next week?
The first one is tell the Chinese we're going to go right after the financial resources of this regime. And number 2, the Chinese better start shutting down their companies and banks that are helping, or we're going to do it for them.
Well, we'll see if they actually follow through on that. Michael Auslin, we appreciate your insights today.